Her lust for life and adventure had her leaving home and taking on the bad girl reputation. To her, if her choices were being used by the men around her for free or using the men for her gain, it was clear to her what the correct course of action was. Leaving her family behind was no big loss because the adventure, freedom, and spoils she found on her journey through life far outweighed the judgment, hurt, and constrictions of her so-called family.
I got something between my legs that'll make a dead man come. Oh, that. I got something between my legs that'll make a dead man come. Oh, that. I'm gonna turn back my mattress and let you all my springs. I want you to find me, daddy, till the bell do ring. Oh, daddy, I want you to shade the drive.
Hello, my name is Summer, and this is Paying for It. And thank you for being here for episode 18. Today, we will be talking about a queen that lusted for life, riches, and most importantly, freedom. In doing so, she found herself one of the most sought out courtesans of her time. Before getting to that though, hello, how are you all doing today? I've been doing pretty good. They are repainting the apartment building, so that's been interesting. It's been kind of like a touch and go on when I can actually record, because man, are they loud. They'll throw their ladders everywhere. They are so loud. And you know what? Do you, boo? I'm not here to be upset about you doing your job. So I've just been on a weird schedule. Other than that, just really been hanging out. I did start at a new pub this week, which is also why I've been on a weird schedule. So yeah, we've been having painters, started a new pub job, and so just getting back into the flow of things and yeah, readjusting as I need to go. So I am recording on Friday. However, I didn't make myself a drink. Maybe I should make myself a drink. I mean, I totally could if I wanted to. But yeah, I have never actually worked for this type of style of pub. It's like real traditional, like English style pub bill. And they have a shit ton of beer on tap, a shit ton of beer in bottle, beers that have weird, fun names and just weird, interesting stories and brewing techniques. I've never heard of a trapeze beer, and apparently that is a beer that's only allowed to be brewed by like monks. So that's cool. Very fascinating vibe. Anyways, I've never worked for a place that allows you to have a shifty after work, which is basically a free beer to like decompress and be done with your shift, like calling it quits for sure. So I can't be mad about that, free beer. Hell yeah. I'm here for it and I love that. So wish me luck at this pub. Not much else is going on for me though. I hope you guys have been doing well. And yeah, I'm skipping current events for now just because I've been avoiding the Twitter as it makes me incredibly sad. You really see the worst in people on Twitter. Like I just fall into that trap where I'm like, my God, the world, it's falling apart, which like granted it kind of is, but also just like Twitter really can bring out the worst in people and I'm just not here for it. So yeah, I've been trying to avoid the Twitter. I'm also a huge true crime lover as well, which I think we've talked about on here before, but I had to take a break from that as well. I mean, I just like watched One of my favorite podcasters, Mile Higher, they had talked about a case, so I did watch that, but lately I have been fully backing off of some true crime because, I think I've just been watching way too much, and it was freaking me out a little bit, so taking a break. Other than that, I am downloading Zelda because Zelda came out today. Hello, so fucking excited. And we'll be, as soon as I'm done recording, I will be playing that. So you've lost me for a while. No, I'm just kidding. I'll be back next week, okay? So I think but I'm deciding that I think in the beginning it'll be nice to just chit chat a little bit. You can get to know me, and hopefully eventually we can get to know each other. And just if I find any positive news I want to share, that is something I will do. But I don't want the beginnings to just be gloom and doom, because that's not really what I want here. I want to be happy and tell fun stories that maybe not have the best outcome or whatever, but still aren't just the world's ending tomorrow kind of thing and everyone hates everyone and no one can be kind to each other, so I'm trying to avoid that. All right, but with that, you know what time it is. Grab yourself a cocktail, a mocktail, a coffee, whatever you fancy. Today, it's Friday. Maybe I'll grab a beer. Yeah, let me do that real fast. Not prepared today, you guys. I'm being a bad podcast host. I'm sorry. Okay, I grabbed myself a beer. All right. With that being said, you know what time it is. Grab yourself a cocktail, a mocktail, coffee, whatever you fancy. Today, I have decided to try a Shiner toasted amber lager, lightly toasted with barley and the finest hops. Now, way back when, in the first couple episodes, I tried a raspberry chocolate Shiner that I can't quite remember the actual name of, and I didn't like it. So this is from the same pack. It also came with a cold brew Shiner beer, and I didn't like that one either. Now, Shiner's my favorite beer, but flavored beers, especially sweet flavored beers, not the greatest. Travis, can you try not to bite that, please? Boot, scooch, and cat. All right. But hopefully this one, it's an amber lager. Hopefully it's good. We'll check it out. It has a great can. All right. So, that's what I'll be drinking today. And cheers, 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 cheers. And let's get into it. Oh, okay. That one's good. Yeah, that one's not bad. That one isn't sweet. So, also I'm having a low-key day today, I just did not really feel like... I did not feel like getting ready, so that is why we are looking like this. All right, don't judge me, okay? All right, today we are going way back to a different time. However, this queen is going to show us that life really wasn't that different even in the 1800s. She was a queen that worked hard and found the positive in life, lust and beauty. She used her quick wit and charm to win over some of France's most important gentlemen and become the talk of the town. We love her for her body confidence and her trendsetter ways. I am totally excited to introduce you to Cora Pearl. Born Emma Elizabeth Crouch in Portsmouth, England, around 1835. Now, we will come back to her age and the confusion around it. Anyways, there is a confusion around it, but historians are pretty sure that she was born in the year 1835. When and what day and stuff, They don't know. And this was like a couple years before they actually started doing like birth certificates. And so the mystery behind her date of birth and stuff doesn't come from that, but we'll get to that later. Anyways, she was born to parents Lydia and Frederick Crouch. Her parents seem to be both into the music field, giving private lessons within their house. Her mother is a singer and her father is a popular composer for his time. He's playing with my tripod. Her younger years are filled with lots of music. Stating in her memoir, I was born to hear a great deal of noise. If not to make it, there was in my case a kind of presentation to clatter. A lot of her time as a young kid, she spent singing like her mother and playing the piano like her father. They had a big family. The exact number is kind of a mystery to history, but more on that later as well, because her father was about to up and leave them due to the fact that he was deeply in debt. Running from his debts in April of 1841, Fredericks leaves the family pretty high and dry. He takes off to London as well, and he, does what normal men do, I guess, when they run from their first family in debt. They start a new family, and that's what he does. He left his family of around 15 children. His first family has about 15 children, give or take, to run from his debts to start another family in 1843. And not even bothering to get a divorce on his first marriage and going to the Catholic Church this second time to get his second marriage. They go on to have 5 more children, and he will go on to repeat his pattern by leaving that family, probably due to money issues, and running off to the United States, going on to marry at least 3 more times. And from there, we kind of lose the rest of Frederick's story to history. But he was no father of the year or anything, all right? Now, at this time, Emma is around 6 years old when her father leaves her and her family. It definitely kicks her life into a whole new path. Now, if that path was a good or a bad one, well, who can say but Emma herself? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Emma's father, I also have a tea down here that I brought because I wasn't planning on having a beer, but Friday. Anyways, Emma's father is gone, and not soon after, her mother Lydia meets and marries a wealthy man. Now, I didn't look much into this man because he doesn't mean much to her story, or he may play a big part in her story, but we'll be getting to that soon. He just did not play a big part in my story because you'll see what I mean here in a few minutes. Emma and Richard, her stepfather, did not get along. It seemed as if maybe he didn't get along with any of Lydia's children because eventually, very shortly after marriage, they send the children off to a French boarding school. This will actually benefit Emma in her life in the long run. I don't think Emma nor her parents realized exactly how at this moment, but she will later be happy that she went to this boarding school. In the French boarding school, she learns the country's language and manners. After finishing school, she goes to live with her grandparents in 1854 to avoid being around her stepfather at any cost possible. She did not want to be a part of that. She did not want to be around him. Nothing. They did not like each other. During this time, she gets a job working as a milliner's assistant. For those of you who are like me and have no clue what a milliner's is, don't worry, I got us. It's basically a person who designs, makes, trims, and sells women's hats. So it was probably really big back then, because hats were all the rage. But Emma basically was that person's assistant, and she found that the job was pretty damn boring. She was like, fuck it, I don't like this job. But she did what she had to, and that was... She was working this job for a while, but that was until, out of boredom or maybe due to a pivotal moment in her life, things were going to change again for Emma. So according to Emma in her memoir, one day she's walking home from church when her, at this time you had to, as a young lady, as a young unmarried lady, to keep your virtue, you had to have chaperones. Okay, so according to her in her memoir, her chaperone doesn't show, and so she's walking home when she's approached by a much older man in his mid-40s. After talking for a while, he invites her to go somewhere for some cake, and so she agrees. She's like, hell yeah, I'll take some cake. Upon getting to their destination, it turns out to be a gin palace, though. And he gets her cake, but he also pairs it with a lot of gin, getting her drunk and then taking advantage and raping her. It was really sad. While awaking from this event in a hotel, she is confronted by the man who took advantage of her. He's asking her to become his regular mistress. She, of course, refuses, and he leaves the room, but not before leaving her 5 pounds on the dresser, which I would kill a man, okay? Ugh. I wouldn't kill a man, but it's just like, what the disrespect, okay? But it was more money than she'd ever seen before in her life. But now her life is, of course, altered in a way that she had to live with. This was the 1800s. You didn't stay out all night as an unmarried young lady, even if it was nothing happened to her, even if she just wanted to be out by herself that night, you just didn't do that. And she stayed with her grandparents, who were highly religious. Everyone was religious at this time. Well, most everyone was religious, or at least they pretended to, stay in proper society. But you just didn't do stuff like this. You just didn't come home, especially as a young unmarried woman. So it was possible that her grandparents may not have even let her back in, fearing that she was no longer pure. Now, a lot of historians call into question her story, which is like, oh, great. Here we go again. However, before we judge them too hard, the argument isn't that something bad didn't happen to her, but more that when and who actually did it is what they call into question. So, remember when I was telling you that her and her stepdad did not get along? Well, and that he may or may not have played a big part in her story? Well, historians say that it isn't impossible that Emma's story could very well be true. We are talking about the 1800s here. The world itself was just way more dangerous and violent, especially if you were a young woman or just woman in general. So, though, what did happen or didn't happen? We might not ever know, but a lot of people who study her life believe that Emma, when she had still been living with her mom and new stepfather, Richard, before being shipped off to the boarding school, that he may have been the one to actually take advantage and assault her. And part of the reason that that might be part of the reason that the kids were sent away. Once getting into her grandparents' house, Emma was faced with a grandma who was deeply religious and often stating the bad things that could happen to females who strayed from the godly path, or just talking bad about those who strayed, So she's faced with this grandma who might not be, different time and stuff. So she's not thinking, like, at this point, she doesn't know. So she's just telling her granddaughters to be careful and to, like, protect yourself. But what possibly could have happened is that she was already, in her eyes, ruined because of her stepfather, and she can very well tell them that because it wouldn't matter in society's eyes what happened to her. It's her fault in society's eyes. Let me tell you, what a shitty time to be alive, okay? Emma most likely knew that eventually she would have to face the reality of her situation because soon her grandparents were going to probably want to get her married. And so she'd have to eventually face the facts of being assaulted and no longer being a virgin. Sadly, at this time, society felt that the only value women held was in their purity. Oh, and trust me, they would check before marriage and stuff like that, just to make sure, which is, gross, cannot. Women no longer could hold the little status they may have if they weren't a virgin. And sadly, that is really the case. So many women who had bad things happen to them were forced to deal with this just shame because there was no help for them or anything like that. It's just really sad situation, So honestly, either way, if she chose to make up a story on why she chose to leave and not return to her grandparents, or it was a true recollection on what happened, that she did run into a much older man who took advantage of her, either way, it doesn't really matter because her choice was taken away from her as a girl who then had to pick up the pieces and play the cards life gave her. And that's what she did. And oh boy, did she do it well. She was not the type of person to let life just run her over, and she was not the type of person to be used by people around her. So, this brings us to a new era for Emma and, well, to her new identity and her beginning years in the pleasure business. You never start on top, right? But she didn't start off at the bottom either. And most likely that was due to, well, her beauty. Emma was gorgeous. She was so pretty, and she was so pretty. If you're watching my video versions, you can see her. Oddly, for the fact that this story takes place almost 200 years ago, we have a surprising amount of information and photos on her. So you should subscribe to see her because she's, so pretty. Anyways, though, back to Emma. She's at this point in her life where she has made a decision that she no longer could go back to her grandparents, okay? And so she didn't leave her grandparents without a plan, though, nor does she leave feeling all that sad. According to her, I would be telling a lie if I said separation from my family made me cry. She was looking forward to the freedom she would have, and so she goes on to rent out a room in the convent garden under her new name and new identity, Cora Pearl. She picked Cora Pearl because she liked the idea of being a gem on a strand of lovers. So she's really not that upset, we don't know what she was going through at that time, especially if she just went through this traumatic event. But had the traumatic event happened years prior, she might have had plenty of time to start thinking and she clearly had high self-worth. And so I think she just didn't pay mind to some of what her family and religion said. So the convent garden was located very closely to the Strand. And if you remember from episode 17, the Strand was London's red light district. So close enough to the district, but Cora, she isn't planning on working the streets. Her sights are set on big marks with lots of love to give. Cora's idea is that she's going to enter into a beneficial relationship with a powerful and wealthy man. To do that, she starts working alone and entertaining gentlemen callers out of her hotel room, only accepting men who could afford her time. Your historical escort. It isn't long before she meets a 25-year-old property owner who she mentions in her memoir named Bill Blinkwell. However, historians are able to identify him really as Robert Bignell. Travis is coming up to say hello. Little gargoyle. Not up there, my boy. He's a menace to society. Robert was an owner of a dance hall turned pleasure club, the Argyle Rooms. Now, at this time in the 1800s, to be a property owner, well, you had money and prestige. This was just the type of man that Cora was looking for. And it only helped that he was good looking. So upon meeting her, he becomes pretty enamored with her, and soon they enter into a love affair. Eventually, she will go on to move into the Argyle room with Robert. Their love affair was filled with him speaking French to her in a voice that she describes as good looking with a fine and pleasant voice. They took many trips to the English countryside. Robert was deeply in love with Cora, and he wanted to marry her. When he asked her, though, she turned him down flat, letting him know that she detested men far too much to obey one of them forever. You know, at this point, she's pretty honest and open about her dislike for men. You know, she's like not the biggest fan of guys in that way, and she's definitely not willing to give up her freedom for anyone, you know? That was the truth. She didn't like, respect, or trust men in her life. Honestly, can we blame her? On top of that, she definitely didn't love Robert like that. For Cora, Robert was someone who had money and prestige and was able to offer her adventure and the finer things in life. So he really was someone she was kind of just using, for lack of a better word. Eventually, Robert surprises his love with a trip to Paris. However, in order for her to be able to travel with him, she had to claim him as her husband. That she did, and because she definitely was not going to pass up on the opportunity to visit France. Finally, they have a lovely time, and Cora loved Paris, the culture, the food, the everything. They spent a month in Paris together. Their days filled with sightseeing and touring famous sites of Paris, while their nights were spent dining at Paris's finest restaurants and dancing the nights away. Living it up, you know, when in Paris. But when Robert told her it was time to go, they needed to return, Cora refused. She, in fact, made a show about kind of throwing a fit. And he kind of probably tried to put his foot down. It was, you know, I think he tried to use the whole fact that her passport said that he was her husband. And he kind of tried to be like, he tried to like boss her around a little bit, you know, and she was like, not having it. So she throws a fit. She tells him, no. And she makes a big show about burning her passport, and she yells at him, you go if you want to. I remain here. So she made her decision. She was not returning to London with him. And Robert figured that there was no reason to try and beg her to come home with him. So he paid the hotel bill and left. She admits to feeling a little sorry for him, but no way in hell was she going back to the old dirty dance halls of England, bringing an end to her first love affair as a demi mode and beginning her life as one of France's most popular courtesans during the Second French Empire. Cora Pearl's love for Paris wasn't just for the culture and the food. A lot of her reason for wanting to stay was because of their love for the more progressive look on sex and sex work. Observing that the women of the night ruled the French upper class, and she wanted to be part of that world. Prostitution was legal in France. This was in the time of the opulent Second Empire ruled by Emperor Napoleon III. In this rule, fallen women of the French had their own celebrity class. People kind of loved them. Men not only had affairs, but the mistress you chose was also kind of a status symbol on who you were as a man, okay? So the ladies of the night were accepted in their own right. They would still have to register and often would have to do what could be pretty humiliating health checks. But again, most of the girls just accepted that. And for where they were living, it was a pretty good life for them. Cora, though, was starting at the bottom again, and this time she kind of was actually starting at the bottom. And so her first notable client in Paris was a sailor named, I'm gonna bug it up, Diamandard. Diamandard. He was pretty much broke, but he amused her, so she allowed him to stay around. Really, I think she was like, kind of like, he has a place to stay and I can use him until I get better arrangements. And when it was time for him to set sail, he promised to return and marry her. Cora was like, yes, baby, I'll wait for you, but in the back of her head, she knew that was a lie. She planned to never see him again. Cora wanted to squeeze everything she could out of the City of Lights. So after her first love affair, she goes on to get an agent, or what they were known for, the ladies of the night, procurer. My gosh, which is just basically a person who obtains a woman as a prostitute for another person. So he was just like, he had the connections. He kind of acted as a kind of like a male version of a madam, but not like running a house. He had several apartments for girls to live in, and he probably took part of their income, but it wouldn't be quite like a pimp in the fact that, like, one, they didn't date, but he also had a clear set of like speculations, and they got a lot of their money that they earned too. But they did sleep together, and we know this because that was when she, we know this from her story. So she meets, again, gonna fuck this name up, I'm sorry, Mosnier Robais, a man of good standing with the Persian high society. He set her up in a nicer neighborhood, teaching her the basics of the business. He also helped her expand her repertoire and specialty skills. With this help, she was introduced to a higher status clientele. It isn't long before her name grows in popularity. Soon, her reputation grows, and past clients rave her praises. Some of those praises included her being an enthusiastic lover, a game of sensual delights, and almost superhuman knowledge of the art of love. So, people are loving her, okay? However, Cora, she's smart and realizes that she needs more than just her looks to get to where she wants to be. If she was going to be able to succeed the way she wanted to as a high-class woman, she needs something to set her above the plenty of competition. And she did have a few things that set her above. And those things were, one, her confidence. She loved herself. She felt herself. She was that bitch, okay? And she had a sense of humor. Her confidence and personality really set her aside from those around her. She wasn't afraid at all to love life, find humor in everything. Her sense of humor really setting her aside from the other girls that she was competing with for the blue blood men who she was trying to land. She was able to make bored men laugh like no other. And well, the men loved her for it, okay? They loved that. They loved that she was just this cute little thing who really lusted for life and was able to just find jokes in anything, you know? And wasn't afraid to say them. A lot of the other women, you know, due to like society, they're afraid, you know, they're a little shy, not as open to letting themselves just say whatever they want. Now, before Cora lands her first big regular, she lives with her frenemy. Her agent, I'm not going to even try to say his name again, did set her up in a swanky neighborhood, but she did have to share her home with another woman who was like her coworker. She was a blonde bombshell that went by the name Caroline Hassey. They got along mostly, but they were also business rivals and often were competing for the same men. You know, they both wanted the same thing. And that 100% resulted in some interesting catfights between the two of them. Speaking of the catfights, one time a fire broke out in their complex, and in a very Cora Pearl way, and her sense of humor really coming through, she sticks her head out of the smoke-filled window to yell at the stable hands down below who were there to help with the fire. I'll sack the first person who takes a bucket of water to that cow upstairs. Which is like, okay, Cora. Eventually, though, Cora is going to go and land herself some royalty, baby. But not only that, she becomes his regular mistress. She hits it off with Victor Messina, the Duke of Revival. With a title like that, it was a huge win for her, and she is like ecstatic. She later would say that he was my first link in my chain of gold lovers. He was very thoughtful and very anxious to please her. Keeping her was important to him. He loved to shower her with designer clothes and jewelry. He also paid for her new living expenses for 6 years, allowing her to move away from her need for her procurer, but also her frenemy. You know, she's moving away. She's moving on up. Victor was her bump into the next tier of her career, allowing her to access a whole new prestigious clientele. Victor, though, would sometimes have bouts of jealousy of her seeing other men. However, those fits didn't ever last long to become any real issues. And if you guys are watching this video version, you can't stand on that baby. Gargoyle, he's come to say hello in his true menace to society ways. He's trying to get on my mic stand. He is so precious. So precious. He's mad because this is his chair. He likes to sit in it, and now he's attacking the lights. Anyways, let's move on. So he kind of sometimes can get jealous, but they don't really get into it doesn't become too big of an issue. Because she refuses to be owned by any man. So for her, it's if you're with me, you're accepting my way of life, and this is my job. And if they wanted to be part of her life, they had to accept that. Even though she was in a long-term relationship with Victor, she didn't stop seeing other men either. Some of those men being William, Prince of Orange, heir to the throne of the Netherlands. He once paid 5,000 francs for one night with her. Sometimes I'm writing and researching and I never say these words out loud, and then I think I know them, and then I go to say them out loud and I'm like, wait. So he pays 5,000 francs for just one night with her. And at the end of their night, he is in such awe of her. He leaves her with this priceless necklace of black pearls that she, of course, loved. And she was often showing it off. And honestly, black pearls, hello, beautiful. Another client of hers during this time was Prince Giacomo Murat. What a name. Who showered Cora with money and, you know, of course, Cora loved that. The love for Cora seemed to run in his family, though, because so did his 17-year-old son, Prince Archel, who also would go on to give her lots of money and her most prized gift she'd ever gotten, and that was in the form of her first horse. We'll get more onto her true love of horses later. With her new status and using Victor's money wisely, she goes on to start really building her brand. She does this by throwing very, very extravagant dinner parties. She does everything big, 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 okay? She goes on to hire a culinary genius for his time, and even though she was almost positive he was cooking the books and stealing from her, she let it slide because she was the talk of the town, not just because the dinner either. Cora spares no expense when it comes to entertaining. During a 2-week rager in Beachy, she spends 30,000 on food alone. 1,500 of that was just to get out of 15 francs, not 100. 15 francs of that just to get out of the season, just to get an out of season violet because she just needed them to garnish her fruit platter. Which, okay, girl, let's talk about that. A flower, come on, for a garnish. Here I am judging, but you know, I'm gonna judge a little bit, Cora. Why the flower? Anyways, she didn't just stop at the food, though. She loved fireworks, and they were really all the rage back then. And, you know, that actually surprised me because I didn't know fireworks were a thing back then, and shit, would that be a scary situation. You know, no rules, regulations, and just these random ass, like, bombs going off. And they, like, really were the rage back then. So she was often setting them off, handing them out to her guests, just like randomly, you know, to surprise the other guests. She'd be like, you know, to elevate the room. So she just expected them to be just setting them off, even in her house. She didn't care. So if you weren't on the guest list, though, you were snubbed. Not only that, you were going to have some real FOMO, okay? So it's pretty clear that for the fact that people would do anything to try to get into her parties. They would go as far as attempting to crawl through her windows when they thought no one was watching. If you were not on the guest list, you were nobody. And even if you were somebody, but you weren't on her guest list, you were no longer somebody, okay? Sorry, you're not here? No respect. Outside of the time spent planning and throwing parties, also spending time with the men who paid for those parties, she would also love going to the casinos, spending way too much money on gambling and just living lavishly. One time, though, she went to enter a casino and the doorman stopped her, refusing her entrance, saying that her presence would cause a scandal. Pissed and most likely feeling a little insulted, she attempts to carry on with her day. That afternoon, though, she just so happens to run into a very powerful friend of a friend. Napoleon III's half-brother, of the Duc de Marnay. Oh gosh, these French names. She told him what had happened to her earlier that day, and well, he couldn't let that stand for this beautiful girl. So they made their way back to the casino, and this time the doorman could barely stop himself from tripping over himself to get to the door for her. The two of them went into the casino and had a grand time. Although not all of her adventures in a casino ended so lovely. See, Cora loved to gamble, and she definitely, as we can tell, had a spending problem. She didn't know how to budget herself. So one time she was taking a vacation to Monte Carlo. She ended up owing the house up to like 70,000 francs. And she didn't have the money on her. Oops. And she also happened to not have the money to pay for the hotel bill. So she was like, fuck. She had to make a quick getaway. So she did the only thing she could think of, something she wasn't proud of. She sneaks out of her room, leaving all of her clothes and belongings behind because she wants them to think she's not leaving. And on her way out, she somehow is able to steal 500 francs from the hotel cash desk in order to get a ride back home. Cora, what you doing, girl? Don't be too mad at her, though, for doing that, though, because she always made sure that everyone got their money eventually. So the hotel did get their money and she paid her debts to them. This was also the time that she discovered her true love, and that was the horses. After Prince Archile gifted her first horse, one then turned into getting 30, and then between the years 1863 and 1869 she bought 60 more, spending at least 90,000 francs on just one breeder alone. She loved her horses. Those horses were treated better than most of her lovers, and let me be honest, she treated her lovers very well, you know? She just didn't love them. With her new fleet, Cora Pearl again shows that she is ahead of her time because she starts setting trends that all the other ladies soon follow shortly after her. Cora knows that the more money the courtesan Cora knows that the more money a courtesan made, the more she needed to spend and show it off. Rich men wanted their mistresses to be a status symbol. They definitely didn't want them to keep them a secret, and they definitely didn't want them to look like bad, you know? So the richer your mistress was, the higher your status was with your boys. Okay? Lame but true. So Cora comes up with the perfect plan to advertise and flaunt. Cora would take regular rides in her majestic carriages in order to show off her best assets, both material and physical. Victor definitely for a long time helped bankroll her gambling habit, fancy lifestyle, and extravagant parties. It is said that Victor was infatuated with Cora and spent a great deal of his money on her. Eventually, though, their relationship slowly comes to an end. The exact reasons are, you guessed it, a mystery to history. However, some sources say it was because Victor's family applied a lot of pressure on him to end it because they definitely didn't approve. Other sources say they just kind of grew tired, that he just grew tired of Cora and began to distance himself. I'm not gonna say I know, but I'm gonna assume it was probably his family behind pressure on him to get out of that relationship, stop spending all the money, and maybe move on and get married, have children. No matter the reason behind the split, Cora isn't brokenhearted, and she very quickly moves on to a bigger wallet and a higher status. Her next link in her golden chain of lovers will come from Napoleon III's half-brother, Duc de Mornay. That's right, the man from the casino. And She actually liked this one. He was handsome, charming, and powerful, of course. Even though he had plenty of choices when it came to his mistresses, she would soon very quickly rise to the top and become his favorite. And well, being on his arm definitely rose her to a new, even greater celebrity, really. To the point that she wasn't just a trendsetter for other courtesans. Now she was starting to set trends for the women of France. At this time, Napoleon's wife, the Empress Eugenia, was a fair-skinned, blonde-haired woman who everyone sought to imitate. This was like Napoleon's wife, so she was the empress, because he was the emperor and she was the empress. So she was like, everyone, how everyone is about the queen and the president and shit. Women go to great lengths to dye their hair and powder their faces to like pale out their skin and have, blonde hair. Cora, however, didn't like to be the one to follow anyone's trends, and she wanted to be her own person. So she would go on to dye her hair bright red using ground bricks and ammonia. At first, like all new trends, some made fun of her, calling her clownish. But red soon, though, becomes the new craze. So eventually all the ladies are like, red, it's the color to be. The new spring trend. She is also known to be ahead of her time with makeup, loving to go bold and beautiful. Though some love to talk shit like they always do, she could possibly be credited for inventing the highlighter. She would apply a mix of metallic powder with starches, using it everywhere. Forehead, eyelashes as a body shimmer. She was like, I'm here to shine, baby. And she sure did shine. Being Duke de Marny's favorite definitely had its perks. He would shower her with gifts, designer gowns costing anywhere between 1600 and 250 francs each, and she had a lot of them. Knowing that to keep her on his arm, he had to keep her happy. And to keep her happy, you had to spoil her. At this point, she is also known to love the finest of lingerie, willing to spend big, big money on it. But when a boutique tries to take advantage of her and overcharge her, she decides she's not willing to look the other way on this one. So she ends up suing the owner, Madame Rox des Florence, arguing that a bill for 6 negligees totaling 9,500 francs, 9,500 francs was a bit excessive, even for her. During the trial to prove her point, she causes a major scandal by displaying her seductive undergarments in court for all to see as evidence. It does the trick, plus some, because she's able to get about 1,000 francs knocked off the bill and gain a free publicity as her scandals start becoming headlines in England and the French's papers. Eventually, Duke de Monary will go on to pass away in 1865, bringing an end to another long love affair for her. But just like the last time, she does not let it stop her or make her too sad. And just like the last time, her next golden link in her chain of lovers will elevate her place in society once again. Soon, she lands herself a new main squeeze, this one being incredibly prestigious, as it was the cousin of the sitting emperor, Prince Napoleon Joseph Bonaparte. Love that for me. So this is like, she was she was a mistress to Napoleon, the Emperor's Napoleon's, was it half brother? So he actually had no stake to the seat, to the royalty, but Joseph does. He is the cousin, so he's actually family royalty. And to be honest, he was an asshole and everyone fucking hated him. However, Cora would insist he was an angel to those who pleased him. Ugh. Which, if that doesn't give you the picture of the type of man he was also known to become incredibly jealous of Cora and her other lovers. Even though he was married, he would often throw huge temper tantrums over it. He didn't want her seeing anyone else. He felt that she belonged to him. But for Cora, she doesn't belong to anyone. To the point that he would throw huge tantrums to the point that whenever he thought she wasn't giving him enough attention, he would sulk for days and become mean-spirited, going as far as threatening to have her deported. Asshole. You gotta love a hypocrite. Because remember, married with children. Okay. She's out here living her single life, doing her job, and you're married with children thinking you own whatever you set your sights on? Nah, babe. This is not how it works. Cora would often have to make up excuses, like her favorite one, she twisted her ankle when she needed to or wanted to see other clients, because he just couldn't wrap his head around the fact that she wasn't his property and she was allowed to see who she pleased. Perks of being a woman of the night. Freedom, baby! And no one was taking that away from her, including this prince. Though she knew she needed to keep him happy because, well, hello, she was in an affair with a freaking prince. He gave her a huge allowance of 12,000 francs a month, bought her 2 fabulous houses, allowing her to become one of the wealthiest women in France. So, she knew she had to tiptoe this line a little bit, but she also wasn't willing to play his dramatic games. But with her new elevation in status and wealth, she of course goes on to, you guessed it, throw more parties. She loves a party. Cora Pearl was on top of her game in the 1860s, and oh boy did she live it up. She loved throwing big over-the-top parties, loving to shock and spoil her guests. At one of her parties, she served her guests flaming drinks in a silver chamber pot, which is a toilet. And so she just loved to do silly things like that. And flaming drinks at the time were like, what a fab. When she had guests over, she wasn't shy about showing off all her exquisite gifts. That included a gift that Napoleon gave her, which was a custom-made bronze bathtub. And this is the Napoleon, the cousin, not to get confused with the emperor. She wasn't with the emperor. She was with his cousin. They just all had the same name just in case one of them died. They all had the same name. I don't know. That would be so weird. So she got this bronze bathtub from him, and she would love to fill it up with champagne and invite her house guests up to keep her company while she had a soak. She loved any excuse to show off her body. Her confidence was at an all-time high, and her love for the shock value only grew during this time. Once at a costume party, she came undressed as the biblical Eve, which is, I love that, hilarious. And at a dinner party she threw once, she invited the dinner guest to cut into the next dish, and the next dish so happened to be her, served up on a silver platter by 4 footmen wearing nothing but some parsley. So you kind of see who the type of woman she is. She's got a sense of humor, and she just also loves to be naked. Honestly, she loved to show her body off. She was all body. And when she lands her first theater role playing Cupid, she entered the stage in nothing more than strategically placed diamonds. causing a big scandal at the theater that day. She was all confidence and loved being able to do anything she pleased without the fear of dropping in society, because she'd already did that, and so she didn't have to care about anything else. At this point, Cora's confidence, her love for life, and her ability to always be on the arm of an extremely prestigious man has her in high demand, allowing her to have full control of how she did her business and who she took on as a client. Now, if a suitor wanted to be a part of her golden chain of lovers, they had to stand out, be impressive, and of course, shower her with extravagant gifts. And oh boy, did the men of her time trip over themselves, go into debt for a chance to, and oh boy, did the men of her time trip over themselves, go into debt for any chance to be one of her lovers. At one point, one of her wannabe lovers gifted her with a box of candied chestnuts. Each one was wrapped in a 1,000-franc note. So each of these chestnuts are wrapped with money. Another man knew she loved books, so he gifted her a book also with 1,000 francs notes in each page. She was also gifted a silver hearse filled with precious gems and gold. She loved big extravagant things, you know. It wasn't just a gift that were being thrown her way, though. It was rumored that at this point she was earning 50,000 francs a month. Cora Pearl was living her best life as Frances Top Courtesans. I really struggle with that word. Cora Pearl was a smart gal when it came to keeping track of her lovers and the money and gifts they gave her in a little black ledger. It's the 1800s here, so a little black book weren't quite the go-to at this point. She had this ledger and she kept notes. Her ledger had all the names of her clients, the dates of their appointments, how much she had earned for her services, and she kept a column for special notes. She used this column to rate her gentleman callers, and let's just say, not all of them got 5-star ratings. But like all good things, well, they don't last forever, do they? And that is going to be no different for our Cora Pearl. Though she was at the top of her game, politically, things are stirring up, with a new dawn coming for the French people, bringing an end to the seductive era of the Second French Empire. So, it's July 1870, and Cora is living her life up as one of the highest in demand mistresses in France, and she's just enjoying her life. However, France decides it wants to pick a fight over a Persian's candidate for the throne of Spain. A fight that is going to have serious consequences, not only for the reigning empire, but its people as well. They thought they were going to be a bully. It didn't work out that way, honestly. The battle was very short-lived, and Napoleon will go on to surrender on September 1st of the same year, allowing the siege of Paris by the Persians on September 19th. That began with no warning, so they lost this battle, and then they start getting Paris starts getting fucked with. Cora, knowing times were changing, did her best to get her beloved horses out of the city. She was able to get 8 of her horses out of the city by pretending they needed a little exercise. With that, her high, extravagant life will come to a crashing halt, changing the course of her life forever, really. Though before that, just like we have learned from our previous women of the night, we know they all seem to be pretty charitable, and Cora was no different. While Paris was under fire, Cora turned out one of her homes into a hospital to help the nurses and feed the wounded. She would tear up her finest linens to use it for bandages and shrouds, going as far as paying for funeral expenses out of her own pocket. So that brings us to the truce that is called on January of 1871. Though a truce was struck, it still brought an end to the decadent Second Empire and the special love they had for the demi-moded girls. Now she is being met with resentment and dirty looks. So while others are receiving honors for all they had done to help with the battle, Cora was being met with dirty looks, snotty attitudes, and insults. She's angry and feeling pretty insulted. She decides she's going to go to court to demand a repayment for the money she donated during the battle. She did win in court, getting about 15,000 francs. However, 1,500 francs. However, that just earned her more dirty looks and insults. She would later go on to say that she wished she hadn't been that petty and gone to court, stating that the best reward was the gratitude of those she had helped. However, at the time, she was just humiliated and pretty disrespected. Now, like all of the imperial family, her Prince Napoleon was living in exile in Florence. They stayed in touch by writing to each other. In early 1871, they decided to plan a little reunion in London. This would be her first trip back to England in 20 years. Upon arriving, though, she wasn't met with open arms, not even really with kindness. Cora had booked a room for her and the prince at the Grosvenor Hotel. Once getting there, though, the manager recognized her and he threw her out, refusing to even return her deposits. The hotel would attempt 100 years later to try to make it up to her. Sure, because on February 23rd, 2012, the hotel would go on to dedicate a room to her, the Cora Pearl suite. It screams Cora when walking into it, with a glass chandelier, feather trimmed lamps. They even have a replica of her bronze bathtub. Topped off with a giant oil painting of Cora over the bed. Now, my opinion, though, not that it matters, but I don't think the hotel at all is attempting to make it up to Cora, but more they just know what will make money, and they're just attempting to make money off of her now that she's long gone, because the history brings everyone crawling, I guess. So, shitty hotel, I would say. But that won't keep me from wanting to visit, to be honest. I'm not going to lie to you. Anywho, Cora is back in France, her home, and it's 1872. She's 37, but pretending to be 30. Though the society's opinion on her job has changed, she is still very much working. It is at this point that Cora is going to become the obsession of a 27-year-old man who's always gotten what he's wanted. That would be until Cora. Alexander Duval, the heir to his family restaurant chain fortune, which makes me wonder if Duval has anything to do with the beer. I should look into that. I didn't think of it, and I had just recently been introduced to that beer. But yeah, so she gets so Alexander was totally infatuated and in love with Cora. He would go on to burn through his inheritance and nearly lose his family's business on paying Cora's rent and buying her ridiculously expensive presents. When his money runs out, though, Cora had to cut him off, because, remind you, just because Alexander was in love and forgetting that he was paying for her attention, Cora had not. This was business, and if you could no longer afford her, she did the business thing and cut him out. Alexander, though, was pissed and felt that she needed to pay. After attempting to see Cora several times, she, though, did not budge. She refused to see him even if he had money to give. She seen that his feelings for her were clouding his judgment, so she felt it best to no longer pursue any type of relationship with him. Though he lived his entire life getting whatever he wanted and being entitled because he had money, he wasn't willing to take no for an answer. So on December 19th, 1871, he spent hours outside her home, pacing back and forth like a madman. Okay, this is some stalker bullshit. This is some stalker bullshit. Okay, so he's pacing her house for hours. Okay, and eventually he's just like waiting for his opportunity to force himself into her home, where he eventually is able to do that, and he confronts her with a pistol he pulls out of her coat, or his coat. In a scuffle, the gun goes off and it gravely wounds Duvall, and it shoots him. He gets shot in his back and in his lungs. Cora did what she could and went into action right away to get him help. However, a shocked society wasn't going to let her off that easy. So even though, in my opinion, he was there to kill Cora and she happened to fight back and he hurt himself instead, in typical human society, they blame her. And they do everything in their power to make her look like a villain. They needed Cora to be the villain, reporting that she was so selfish that all she cared about was the fact that he was getting blood all over her carpet, and that she would go to drag him outside, leaving him for dead, not calling for help or anything. That was so far from the truth, but you know how it goes. Everyone believed what was being said in the papers. And mind you, the political climate for ladies of the night in the French area has definitely changed. So now everyone's like, oh, she's evil, and this just proves it. All the sympathy went to Duvall, who survived and was nursed back to health by his family. Cora, though, was ostracized, blamed for causing the ruin of yet another upstanding citizen. She would go on to get deported, and one by one, clients who had been there with her for years turned on her to save their own reputation. Unfortunately, being deported was her ultimate downfall, being kicked out with nothing, nowhere to go. For a while, Cora would couch surf her way through Monte Carlo and Nice before she was able to reunite with her Prince Napoleon in Milan. They were there for a while, and he would also go on to continue to send her money for a bit. That was until his finances started to dwindle as well, due to them being in exile. In 1874, with regret and affection, he had to end their relationship for good due to the fact that he could no longer afford to spend time with her, leaving Cora in a pickle. Eventually, though, she was allowed to return to Paris, but upon arriving, she is shocked to find that they have put her in major debts. They say that she owes a lot of money. And in May of 1877, Cora was forced to sell some of her most valuable possessions at an auction. This only, though, giving her enough money to pay off her debts so that she could live without the fear of being arrested or deported again. She downsizes her life, but continues to see clients. However, they were definitely not the clientele she was used to, just because high society no longer accepted it. So they had to, keep their mistresses very much in hidden. Also, maybe not even have some so that they can save their reputation. Cora will go on to let her gambling problem get the best of her and kind of allow it to take the rest of her money, leaving her without much, but she never was any less body positive because after a bad night in Monte Carlo, she runs into a friend, Julian Arnold, who took her in to allow her to stay in his house for the night. The next morning, though, she gets up and finds him in his study and flashes him by surprise, not offering him anything. No, sir. But rather just to show him that she may have lost all her money, but she has not lost her money maker. In 1886, Cora will go on to write and sell her memoir. She also uses this as an opportunity to be petty to those who kicked her to the curb so quickly after the newspapers turned on her. She gave her former lovers the chance to remain anonymous, for the right price, of course. Some of them paid and some of them couldn't. And this is where the confusion of her age that we talked about at the very beginning comes from. Due to this memoir, she actually in her memoir claims her younger sister's birthday instead of her own. So she claims she's 7 years younger. And for a while, a lot of people, I'm talking years, a lot of people thought that was her age and her birthday. It wasn't until historians kind of started to dig into her life that they figured out that that wasn't quite the case and that she was a little bit older than what she claimed in her book. A lot of articles state that she lived her remaining days in despair. However, if you look deep enough, it seems as if her remaining years were lived out still very cheerful, often visited by friends and in a very comfortable apartment above a carriage shop, and that she lusted for life even through her older age. However, sadly, on July 8th, 1886, at the age of 51, she's going to pass away due to intestinal cancer, just 4 months after she publishes her book. So she doesn't really get to reign in the success of her memoir. In her memoir, though, she tells us that she has a truly happy life. She regretted her decline, of course. That was a lot out of her hands, of course, but goes on to say that she would have regretted living a quiet life more, leaving us with some words of a woman who was way beyond her time, finding freedom that was unlike anything you could have as a woman in the 1800s. I have never deceived anyone because I have never belonged to anybody. My independence has been all my fortune, and I have known no other happiness. It is still what attaches me to life. I prefer it to the riches, necklaces. What a life Cora Pearl was able to work hard and live for. A woman of ill repertoire was never ashamed of herself or allowed others to shame her. She loved the independence that she was able to gain in her life of naughty. She loved the life she led, and even when things turned sour for her, she never once lost her lust for life and freedom. I definitely enjoyed learning of Cora Pearl and her fascinating history and all the gold links in her lovers' necklaces. I was a little hesitant to do a story in the 1800s. I'll be honest, I really like the early 1900s to the 1940s, 50s. I said 1900. 1900s to the 1940s, 50s. Especially the U.S. I like the Wild Wild West. Also, I just feel like sometimes going way back in time. So I put Cora's story off for a while, even though she's been on my list since the beginning. And then when I finally started digging into her story, I was like, damn, this is a good story. And I felt connected to her for her want for freedom and just her ability to see past some bullshit, and I liked that. In my opinion, Cora made up the story of the man in the gin palace because she didn't want to share her personal trauma, and I think that's okay. Maybe there was a Gin Palace man, and maybe he was her first actual John, who in her story, he had to be the unfortunate sacrifice, the villain in her origin story, I guess. Who will really ever know? However, I think it's fair to be able to hold things back, especially if it was her stepfather who was the one to hurt her. And why put yourself through that trauma again to have to live through or have to face any backlash from family or anything, you know? Mind you, she has like 20 siblings out there, you know? And I'm assuming that her stepfather wasn't alive, but you know, you never know. So that's just my opinion. Who really knows other than Cora and the gentleman involved, I guess. So, but yeah, that's how in my opinion, she, once getting into her grandma's house and like working this boring job, and then like her grandma's like in her face kind of, she started to come up with a plan and maybe started looking around and figuring out what she could do. And yeah, so that's my opinion, and I could be wrong, and you know, so don't come for me. Either way though, I think leaving her family was a well thought out plan way before actually taking the plunge. She wanted a life of freedom, true freedom, and the only way she was going to get it was to be a little bit bad. But with that, I hope you enjoyed today's episode on Cora Pearl, a queen of confidence. She was able to enjoy life in a way that not many women ever even understood or had the chance to think about. We love her lust for life, her body confidence, and just her all-around humor. She would have been a very fascinating queen or person to talk to. But with that, that's all I have for you this week. Don't forget to follow, like, leave a review. It helps paying for it a lot. And if you want to see Cora and all her beauty and history come to life, I highly recommend you subscribe to the video versions that come out early on Sundays. And until next time, I'm off to play Zelda. You all have a great week, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.
I got something between my legs gonna make a dead man come all that. I got something between my legs gonna make a dead man come all